Rain drummed against the bus stop shelter in Portland as Dylan Parker shifted baby Sophia in his arms, her tiny fist clutching his worn jacket. The 3-month-old slept peacefully, unaware her father was barely holding himself together. 6 months since Alex died in a hate crime that shattered their world, leaving Dylan alone with memories that woke him screaming. At 28, Dylan understood abandonment in ways most people never would. The foster system taught him family was a luxury he couldn't afford. That love came with conditions and expiration dates. He had spent his childhood moving from house to house, learning to pack his few belongings quickly and never get too attached. When he met Alex during college, everything changed. For the first time, Dylan believed he could build something permanent, something real. Alex saw past the walls Dylan had built, past the fear that made him flinch when people got close. They planned a future together, talked about marriage and children, about breaking cycles of abandonment. Then one night in March, 3 strangers decided that 2 men walking home together was reason enough for violence. Alex didn't survive the beating. Dylan did, but barely. He spent weeks in the hospital, learning to live with injuries that would never heal, holding their newborn daughter who would never know the parent who wanted her desperately. Now, clutching Sophia close against the October wind that cut through his thin coat, Dylan heard something that made him pause, sobbing. Not the kind from physical pain, but the deep, soul-crushing sound of people who had lost everything. He turned toward the bench and saw them, an elderly couple, probably in their late 60s, holding each other as rain soaked through their threadbare clothes. The woman had silver hair hanging in wet strands around her weathered face. Her companion, a tall man with hands that spoke of decades of hard work, tried to comfort her while his shoulders shook with emotion. Dylan had learned in his years as a social worker to recognize family abandonment signs, the way elderly people carried themselves when their children had given up on them, the bewilderment of being discarded by those who should love you most. It was a look he remembered from his own mirror during those long nights in group homes, something deep in his chest. The part Alex had taught to trust and love again wouldn't let him walk away. He approached slowly, Sophia's warmth against his chest giving him courage he didn't know he still possessed after months of grief. Eleanor managed her name through broken sobs. The man beside her was Robert, her husband of 50 years. Their son Michael had brought them here this morning, promising to return within an hour. That was 7 hours ago, and the afternoon was growing cold. Robert cleared his throat, his voice trembling. Michael had told them about a beautiful new house, about how they deserved comfort in their golden years. He had convinced them to sell their family home, the house Robert had spent 30 years paying off. The proceeds were supposed to fund this new beginning, but Michael had disappeared with their life savings. As Dylan listened, holding Sophia closer, he felt something shift inside him. These weren't just strangers in trouble. They were kindred spirits, people who understood being thrown away by those who should have protected them. When he offered them his apartment for the night, Eleanor's tears changed from despair to disbelief. That evening, as Eleanor rocked Sophia to sleep with practiced hands, Dylan sat across from Robert at his kitchen table. When Robert began speaking about his younger brother Tommy, Dylan understood why fate brought them together. Tommy had been the artistic one. Robert whispered, "In 1965, when Tommy was 22, their parents discovered letters from another man. Instead of love and acceptance, Tommy found change locks and burned photos. Robert was young then, scared, following his parents' lead. Tommy died alone in a distant city, and Robert carried that guilt for 50 years. Sometimes the family that saves us isn't the one we're born into, but the one brave enough to see us when we feel invisible." Subscribe to Heart Stories for stories of chosen families. The first real test came 3 weeks later when Dylan sat across from Judge Morrison in family court, Sophia sleeping in his arms while Eleanor and Robert flanked him. The social worker's report painted their living situation as unconventional at best, problematic at worst. A single gay man raising an infant with 2 elderly strangers who had no legal connection to the child. Dylan's hands trembled as he listened to concerns about the apartment being too small, the elderly couple having no official status, questions about appropriate childcare, and his emotional stability following Alex's death. The opposing attorney spoke in clinical terms about traditional family structures and proper environments for child development. When Dylan's turn came to speak, his voice started quietly but grew stronger. He told the court about coming home exhausted to find Eleanor singing lullabies to Sophia, about Robert fixing the broken heating with patient hands that had learned their craft over decades. He spoke about the stability they provided, the wisdom they shared, the unconditional love they offered freely. Eleanor testified next, walking to the witness stand with commanding dignity. When asked about her motivations, her answer was simple. She spoke about recognizing kindness when she saw it, about understanding that family came in many forms, about believing children needed love more than conventional structures. Robert's testimony focused on practical matters. He detailed home repairs completed, safety measures installed, ways he contributed to creating stability for Sophia. His voice thickened with emotion when he spoke about his brother Tommy, about family that failed to protect someone they should have loved, about his determination never to let that happen again. Judge Morrison granted Dylan full custody a week later, acknowledging that family stability couldn't be measured solely by traditional structures. The evidence clearly showed Sophia thriving in an environment filled with multiple caring adults who prioritized her well-being above their own comfort, but their legal victory was shadowed by other challenges. Dylan's colleagues began making comments about his personal situation affecting his professional judgment. Supervisor meetings included suggestions that perhaps Dylan needed time to sort out his living arrangements before taking on complex family cases. The neighborhood presented its own obstacles. Comments from other parents at the market, pointed stares when Eleanor walked with Sophia, whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Dylan approached. The assumption seemed to be that something inappropriate was happening in their household. Jake Thompson entered their lives during one of Sophia's routine pediatric appointments. He was the pediatric nurse who handled Sophia's measurements and preliminary checks with gentle competence that immediately put both Dylan and the baby at ease. Jake had grown up understanding unconventional families. Raised by his aunts after his parents died when he was 8, he recognized the fierce protectiveness that chosen families developed. His questions about Sophia's development came from genuine professional interest, not the barely concealed judgment Dylan had grown accustomed to. Their conversation extended beyond medical necessities. Jake asked thoughtful questions about Dylan's support system, about how he managed single parenthood demands, about whether he felt he was receiving adequate community help. The questions were personal but not intrusive, from someone who understood Dylan's challenges. When Jake mentioned living near Dylan's neighborhood, their paths began crossing outside the medical office. Coffee conversations after Sophia's appointments stretched into lunch meetings, then dinner invitations that included Eleanor and Robert. Jake's presence brought new dynamics. He understood medical needs in ways that complemented Eleanor's intuitive childcare knowledge. He could explain why Sophia's sleep patterns were changing, what developmental milestones meant, when certain behaviors were normal versus concerning. More importantly, Jake treated Eleanor and Robert with deserved respect and appreciation. He asked Robert about carpentry work, sought Eleanor's advice about family recipes, included them in conversations rather than talking around them. The romantic relationship between Dylan and Jake developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than desperation or loneliness. Both men understood any relationship would need to accommodate and strengthen their chosen family structure. Their first official date was a disaster by conventional standards. Sophia came down with a fever. Eleanor was worried sick, and Robert had thrown out his back fixing the front steps. Jake spent the evening helping administer infant medication, comforting Eleanor's anxiety, and helping Robert get comfortable. Dylan realized that night he was falling in love not just with Jake, but with how seamlessly Jake fit into their family chaos. When societal acceptance is conditional on conformity, love becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Proving authentic families are measured not by structure, but by commitment. 2 years later, Dylan stood in their new home in San Francisco, watching Jake help Robert install safety railings while Eleanor taught 18-month-old Sophia to clap her hands. The job promotion had given Dylan the chance to head the city's LGBTQ youth services department, finally putting his lived experience to work, helping teenagers who faced the same rejection he had endured. The move to San Francisco transformed their family dynamics in unexpected ways. Eleanor discovered a vibrant community of grandparents at the local senior center who welcomed her stories about raising Sophia. She found herself becoming an unofficial advocate for other elderly people who had been abandoned by their families, sharing resources and providing emotional support born from her own experience. Robert's skills as a carpenter were in high demand in their new neighborhood. Word spread about the elderly man who could fix anything and charge fair prices. More importantly, he began mentoring young people through the community center, teaching them trades that could provide stable futures. His workshop became a gathering place where teenagers learned not just how to use tools, but how to build confidence and self-respect. Dylan's professional life flourished in ways he had never imagined possible. Working with LGBTQ youth who had been rejected by their families, he could offer not just professional expertise, but genuine understanding of their pain. His office became a safe space where teenagers could speak honestly about their experiences without fear of judgment or dismissal. The informal support group that Dylan and Jake had started in their living room began attracting more people than their home could accommodate. LGBTQ individuals who had created chosen families, elderly people who had been estranged from their children, teenagers who needed surrogate parental figures, they all found their way to the weekly gatherings. Eleanor suggested they formalize their efforts. She had experience organizing church committees and understood the practical aspects of running community programs. Within 6 months, they had established the Chosen Family Network as an official nonprofit organization. With Eleanor as the founding board chair and Robert as the workshop coordinator, Jake's medical background proved invaluable as the organization grew. He developed health and safety protocols for their programs, trained volunteers in basic first aid, and helped families navigate healthcare systems that often didn't understand or accommodate non-traditional family structures. The wedding planning process revealed how deeply their chosen family bonds had grown. When Dylan proposed to Jake on a foggy San Francisco morning, with Sophia giggling in his lap and Eleanor and Robert sharing knowing looks, the proposal felt like a confirmation of something that already existed rather than the creation of something new. Eleanor insisted on walking Dylan down the aisle, saying she had earned the right through years of loving him unconditionally. Robert asked if he could officiate the ceremony, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. Jake's aunts flew in from Denver, instantly bonding with Eleanor over stories of raising children they hadn't birthed but loved completely. The ceremony took place in Golden Gate Park on a surprisingly sunny October day. Sophia, now a confident 2-year-old, served as the flower girl, though she was more interested in chasing the petals she was supposed to scatter. The small gathering included their closest friends from the Chosen Family Network, creating a celebration that honored both tradition and innovation. During the reception, Robert gave a speech that left few eyes dry. He talked about second chances, about learning that love multiplied rather than divided when shared freely, about discovering that redemption sometimes came through the most unexpected doorways. He spoke about his brother Tommy, about the family that had failed him, and about the family they had chosen to create in Tommy's memory. Eleanor's toast focused on Sophia, on the privilege of watching a child grow up surrounded by love that transcended conventional boundaries. She spoke about the gifts that came from aging within a family that valued wisdom alongside youth, that saw experience as a resource rather than a burden. 6 months after the wedding, Jake and Dylan decided to expand their family through surrogacy. The process was complicated by insurance questions, legal documentation that had to account for their unusual household structure, and medical forms that didn't have appropriate categories for their family composition. Eleanor threw herself into pregnancy preparation with the enthusiasm of a woman who thought her grandmothering days were behind her. She researched car seat safety, updated her knowledge of infant nutrition, and began knitting blankets with a determination that amused everyone who knew her practical nature. Robert started building a crib from scratch, determined that his new grandchild would have furniture made with love rather than mass-produced in a factory. The project took months, not because the work was difficult, but because Robert wanted every joint perfect, every surface smooth enough that tiny fingers could explore safely. When Oliver was born on a rainy November morning, Sophia immediately declared him her baby brother. No qualifications or explanations needed. Eleanor held him first after his father's, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Welcome to another child who would grow up understanding that family was something you built with intention, rather than inherited by accident." The expansion of their family coincided with the rapid growth of the chosen family network. What had started as informal gatherings had evolved into a comprehensive support system that provided everything from emergency housing to legal advocacy for people creating non-traditional families. Building family through choice rather than chance teaches us that love is strengthened, not weakened, when it expands beyond conventional boundaries. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday morning in spring when Eleanor was 73. Early onset Alzheimer's, the doctor explained gently, though the words hit their family like physical blows. Dylan watched Eleanor's face as she processed the information, her characteristic composure wavering for just a moment before reasserting itself with the strength that had carried her through decades of challenges. Jake's medical training helped them understand the practical implications, the timeline they might be facing, the resources available for care. But no amount of professional knowledge could prepare them emotionally for watching Eleanor gradually lose pieces of herself, pieces of the memories that had made their family possible. The early stages were manageable with adjustments. Eleanor wrote detailed notes about daily routines, labeled cabinets and drawers, established systems that helped her maintain independence. Sophia, now 5, adapted to Grandma Eleanor's new needs with the flexible resilience that children possess, patiently repeating information and offering gentle reminders without making Eleanor feel embarrassed. Robert struggled the most with the changes. 55 years of marriage had created patterns of communication and shared understanding that Alzheimer's was slowly erasing. Eleanor would sometimes look at him with confused recognition, knowing she should remember this man, but unable to access the decades of shared experiences that defined their relationship. Dylan found himself becoming a bridge between Eleanor's present confusion and her past clarity. He would remind her of stories she had told him, of moments they had shared, of the love that existed even when memory faltered. These conversations became precious rituals that honored Eleanor's identity even as the disease threatened to steal it. The chosen family network rallied around Eleanor with the same fierce protection she had once offered to vulnerable strangers. Volunteers organized schedules for companionship when Dylan and Jake worked, created photo albums with clearly labeled pictures and stories, established routines that provided structure for Eleanor's days. As Eleanor's condition progressed, their family faced impossible decisions about care. The house they loved wasn't equipped for someone with increasing confusion and mobility issues. Professional care facilities specializing in Alzheimer's were expensive and often felt institutional rather than home-like. Jake researched alternatives, connecting with other families who had faced similar challenges. They discovered adult day programs that provided stimulation and social interaction, while allowing Eleanor to return home each evening to familiar surroundings and people who loved her unconditionally. The political climate added another layer of stress to their already challenging situation. A city council candidate began running on a platform of traditional family values, specifically targeting what he called the inappropriate use of public resources to support non-traditional living arrangements. The chosen family network found itself defending its programs against accusations of promoting unstable family structures. The attacks escalated when someone leaked information about Dylan's family receiving city employee health benefits that covered Eleanor's care costs. Conservative media picked up the story, painting their chosen family as an example of liberal excess and misplaced priorities in social services. Dylan faced a decision that terrified him. He could maintain their privacy, let the attacks continue without response, and hope the controversy would fade. Or he could speak publicly about their story, defend the programs that had helped so many people, and risk exposing his family to increased scrutiny and potential harassment. Eleanor, during one of her increasingly rare moments of complete clarity, made the decision for him. She told Dylan that hiding their truth would dishonor everything they had built together, that their story belonged not just to them, but to everyone who needed to know that love could create family in unexpected ways. The public hearing was packed with supporters and critics alike. Dylan spoke about finding Eleanor and Robert at that bus stop, about the family they had created through choice and commitment, about the community programs that had grown from their personal experience of chosen family. Eleanor, despite her condition, insisted on testifying. Her words were sometimes confused, her timeline occasionally mixed, but her message was unmistakably clear. Family was not about conforming to expectations, but about showing up for each other when showing up mattered most. Robert's testimony was brief but powerful. He spoke about redemption, about second chances, about learning that love was not diminished by being shared widely, but strengthened by being offered freely to those who needed it most. The public response surprised everyone. Letters poured in from people who had found family in unconventional places, from elderly people who had been abandoned by their children, from LGBTQ individuals who had been rejected by their birth families but found acceptance in chosen communities. The City Council voted unanimously to expand rather than restrict programs supporting chosen families. Eleanor's courage in speaking publicly, even while fighting a disease that was stealing her words, had created a moment of civic clarity about the nature of family and community. But their public victory was overshadowed by Robert's medical emergency. The stress of Eleanor's condition and the public controversy triggered a minor heart attack that landed him in the hospital for a week. At 77, his recovery was slower than anyone hoped, leaving their family facing the possibility of caring for two elderly members simultaneously. It was during Robert's hospitalization that Eleanor had her worst episode yet. She became convinced that strangers were living in her house and refused to recognize Dylan or Jake. Only Sophia's presence seemed to calm her. Something about the child's innocent acceptance penetrating Eleanor's confusion in ways that adult logic couldn't reach. When crisis tests the bonds of chosen family, love proves its strength not through perfection, but through persistence, showing that commitment deepens rather than weakens when circumstances become difficult. Eleanor passed quietly on a December morning, surrounded by everyone who had become family to her. She died holding Robert's hand while Dylan sang the lullaby she had once hummed to Sophia. Her last breath released during a moment of perfect peace that felt like benediction rather than ending. The memorial service overflowed the community center they had helped build. People came from across the country, individuals whose lives had been touched by Eleanor's fierce advocacy for chosen families. Teenagers she had mentored, elderly people she had befriended, families she had helped create through the network she had championed. Robert's grief was profound, but not solitary. The family that Eleanor had helped create surrounded him with the same unwavering support she had once provided to others. Dylan and Jake rearranged their schedules to ensure Robert was never alone for extended periods. Sophia and Oliver, now 7 and 4, appointed themselves his special helpers, bringing him drawings and sitting quietly beside him when words weren't necessary. The Chosen Family Network established the Eleanor Parker Memorial Fund, supporting emergency assistance for people creating non-traditional families. The fund's first major project was purchasing a building that would serve as both emergency housing and community center for LGBTQ youth who had been rejected by their birth families. Michael's release from prison came 18 months after Eleanor's death. His letter requesting permission to visit was written with humility that suggested genuine transformation rather than manipulation. Robert wrestled with the decision for weeks before agreeing to meet his son, with Dylan and Jake present for support. The reunion was awkward initially, filled with decades of unspoken pain and disappointed expectations. Michael looked older than his years, marked by prison life and the weight of understanding what his greed had cost his parents. He spoke carefully about the therapy he had received, the education programs he had completed, the genuine remorse he carried for the harm he had caused. Robert listened without immediate forgiveness, but also without the bitter anger that might have consumed someone who hadn't learned that families could be rebuilt through choice and commitment. Michael's rehabilitation would be a long process, requiring consistent demonstration of change rather than promises of reform. When Sophia turned 16, she surprised nobody by coming out as lesbian. Her revelation was met with the same unconditional love and support that had defined her upbringing. Robert, now 83, shared stories about his brother Tommy, creating connections across generations and helping Sophia understand that her identity was part of a continuum of love that transcended decades. Dylan's response to Sophia's coming out was everything he had wished for during his own teenage years. No moment of disappointment, no suggestions that she might be confused, no requests that she keep her truth hidden. Instead, he celebrated her courage in living authentically and reminded her that their family's love had always been unconditional. The Chosen Family Network had grown into a regional organization serving thousands of people annually. Dylan testified before Congress about the need for federal recognition of chosen family relationships, his story becoming part of legislative records that would influence future policy decisions. The Supreme Court case that ultimately expanded legal recognition for chosen families cited Eleanor and Robert's successful custody arrangement as precedent for the court's decision. Their story, which had begun at a Portland bus stop, had become part of the legal foundation supporting non-traditional families across the nation. Oliver, now 13, began volunteering with the network's youth programs, helping younger children understand that families came in many forms and that love was strengthened rather than weakened when it was shared broadly. He carried forward the values that Eleanor had instilled, proving that chosen family traditions could be passed to new generations. Robert lived to see his 90th birthday, celebrated by a chosen family that had grown to include dozens of people who considered him grandpa. His final years were spent in the house Dylan and Jake had purchased specifically to accommodate his needs, surrounded by the laughter of children who called him family because love had made them relatives. The annual Chosen Family Day that San Francisco declared in Eleanor's honor became a model for other cities. The celebration recognized that family formation was an ongoing process of choice and commitment, that love could create kinship bonds as strong as any biological connection. Michael's transformation proved genuine through years of consistent behavior rather than dramatic gestures. He became a counselor working with people recovering from addiction, using his experience of losing family through poor choices to help others understand the real costs of destructive decisions. When Robert finally passed peacefully at 91, his funeral was attended by 3 generations of chosen family members who had learned from his example that redemption was possible, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that family was ultimately about showing up for each other when showing up mattered most. The legacy Eleanor and Robert left was not measured in material inheritance, but in the thousands of people who had learned to create family through intention rather than accident. Their story proved that love, when offered freely and received gratefully, multiplied rather than diminished through sharing. What does family mean to you? Have you ever experienced the transformative power of chosen family, or created meaningful connections that transcended traditional boundaries? Share your own stories of love that builds bridges rather than walls. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more journeys that remind us love is always stronger than fear, that family is always stronger than blood, and that home is always where we choose to build it together.